Elara drove the final stretch of the coastal road, her aging, rust-flecked SUV protesting the gravel and the incessant spray of salt. The wind here didn't merely blow, it clawed. Her destination, the abandoned Blackwater lighthouse, stood sentinel on a desolate spit of land, a hulking, conical monument to a century of lost hope and maritime tragedy. Elara was a professional ghost hunter, but she detested the term. She preferred residual energy specialist, or, more accurately, spiritual crossing guard. Her work was pragmatic, rooted in science and psychological closure, not theatrical seances. She didn't seek spirits. She sought solutions. Her goal was always the same: find the tether, sever it cleanly, and ensure the lingering soul finally found peace. She specialized in properties like this, places that were too isolated, too steeped in concentrated despair to be handled by local hobbyists. The lighthouse itself was magnificent and terrifying. The thick white paint had long peeled, revealing the dark, porous stone beneath, and the heavy glass of the lantern room was opaque with salt and grime. Rumors had clung to Blackwater for generations, stories of captains driven mad by the perpetual foghorn, and of a particularly fierce spirit, Silas, a captain lost nearby in an 1890s squall, who reportedly protected the place with possessive aggression. The reports claimed objects flew, temperatures plummeted, and every attempt at renovation or demolition had been met with violent, focused resistance. These details, far from deterring Elara, were exactly what drew her. Aggression meant focus. Focus meant a clear, definable tether, and a clear tether meant a clean exit. Parking the SUV near the crumbling boat shed, Elara spent the first hour unloading her equipment with methodical precision. She worked alone by choice. Her gear was state-of-the-art but utterly devoid of Hollywood theatrics. Thermal cameras, EMF meters, electromagnetic field, complex recording devices tuned to capture infrasound, and the core of her operation, a series of crystal emitters designed to create a localized, calming frequency intended to soothe the spirit into lucidity. She wasn't seeking a confrontation. She was orchestrating a therapeutic intervention. As she dragged a heavy equipment case up the curved stone steps toward the main tower door, the wind howled, sounding less like nature and more like a warning shouted through a clenched jaw. The interior of the lighthouse was a cylindrical tomb of cold. Damp stone, the air thick with the smell of mold and brine. Dust lay heavy on every surface, but beneath the dust, Elara noticed subtle, unnerving inconsistencies. A recent dusting in a specific spot. A window that had been meticulously wiped clean, despite the decay elsewhere. These were not the signs of a vengeful ghoul. They were the signs of a presence that cared about its dwelling. Setting up her primary sensor array in the main watchroom, a space dominated by the central shaft and the skeletal remains of machinery, she activated her primary EMF grid. Immediately, the red numbers spiked violently, not in a chaotic storm, but in a single, sustained, and incredibly powerful localized surge near the base of the tower. This confirmed the legend. Silas was not residual energy. He was conscious. He was present. And he was watching her. Elara secured the last tripod, her grizzled face setting into a line of grim determination. "All right, Captain," she muttered to the frigid air, adjusting the collar of her worn leather jacket. "Let's see just what you're tethered to." Elara began the process of opening the conversation, a term she used for the methodical, hours-long work of coaxing a conscious spirit into communication. She didn't use trigger objects or cheesy theatrics. Instead, she used a sequence of recorded voices, fragments of old maritime law, weather reports from the late 19th century, and most crucially, a woman's voice reading letters detailing the history of the lighthouse. She paired this with carefully modulated infrasound, a low-frequency hum designed to create a sympathetic resonance with the non-corporeal. Her goal was to bypass the fear and anger and appeal directly to Silas's cognition. But Silas was an opponent unlike any she had faced. As she monitored her equipment, waiting for the telltale drops in temperature or spikes in energy that indicated a response, Silas engaged her in a chillingly intelligent game of resistance. It began subtly. The old brass clock on the wall, long rusted and seized, began to tick. Not loudly, but persistently, a rhythmic metallic sound specifically designed to interfere with her sensitive audio recorders. When Elara moved to inspect it, a heavy iron door to the cellar, which she had carefully wedged open, slammed shut with deafening force, rattling the entire tower. She tried to open it, but the ancient latch was sealed tight. The air grew perceptibly colder, but not with a general drop. The cold was focused, a column of frigid pressure pressing specifically against her back, making her spine ache. Elara realized this was not a panic-driven display of spectral anger. This was calculated sabotage. Silas was not a malevolent demon. He was an entity with purpose, intelligence, and an intimate knowledge of his domain, using the environment as an extension of his will. He was trying to get her to leave, not scare her to death. "Captain Silas," Elara finally spoke aloud, her voice calm and steady, echoing unnervingly in the stone chamber. "I am Elara Vance. I am here to help you cross over. You are keeping me from my work. If you have a grievance, state it." The air remained frigid, and the relentless tick of the clock continued its rhythm, mocking her attempt at professional authority. Then came the first direct physical manifestation, and it defied everything she knew about angry, lingering spirits. Elara had set up a complex rig of cables and sensors, snaking across the stone floor. Slowly, meticulously, the cables began to be untangled. Not yanked or shredded, but coiled and reorganized, pulled back toward her equipment cases with the focused, patient effort of a man cleaning up a workspace. It was a bizarre domestic form of defiance. Elara watched, transfixed, as a loop of fiber optic wire drifted a few inches above the ground, then settled precisely into its compartment. When she finally saw him, it was in the reflection of the glass covering a pressure gauge, a fleeting shimmer of an outline. Tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the heavy coat and stern demeanor of a man accustomed to command, his eyes dark with deep, centuries-old melancholy. He wasn't yelling. He was tidying. And in that glimpse, Elara recognized the profound tragedy beneath his fierce exterior. This was a man of order, forced by some unknown reason to exist in chaos. She realized her approach was fundamentally wrong. Silas didn't need to be saved from the lighthouse. He needed to be saved from something else entirely, and the lighthouse was his post. The game of passive resistance continued for another night, culminating in a critical failure of Elara's communication system. The antenna mast was lowered and locked back into its housing with impossible precision. Frustrated and cold, Elara moved her base of operations to the lantern room, the highest, coldest, and theoretically most exposed area. Perhaps the isolation there would force Silas to communicate in a way that couldn't be ignored. As she stared out the grimy, salt-caked lenses, the full scope of the lighthouse's desolate beauty pressed in on her. "I won't leave," Elara stated simply, speaking to the frozen glass of the lens. "I have a contract, and I'm not afraid of you, Captain. I am, however, interested in why a man of your obvious duty is wasting his eternity cleaning up electrical wiring." She waited, allowing the words to settle into the stone. After a moment, a sudden sharp crack reverberated through the confined space. A heavy, century-old glass bottle, perched precariously on a shelf 20 feet away, had suddenly shattered. Not knocked over, but shattered from the inside out as if hit by a sonic boom, yet no noise was heard. A small piece of the thick glass, carried by an unseen force, sliced through the air and embedded itself deeply into the wall just centimeters from Elara's head. It was a violent, clear warning. "Stop. That's better," Elara said, her voice betraying only a hint of her rapidly accelerating heart rate. A direct answer, but why? Why the violence, Silas? Are you tethered to this place by guilt? A low, resonant sound, like the deep sigh of the ocean floor, emanated from the center of the lantern room. It was Silas's voice, not heard with her ears, but felt in the marrow of her bones, heavy with the weight of decades. "Guilt is a luxury I lost 100 years ago, woman. You are here to release me, but I cannot be released. Not while the cage holds." Elara stepped back, her pragmatic facade momentarily cracking. The language was strange, the resonance terrifyingly powerful. "The cage? What are you talking about?" "The light. The stone. The foundations. They hold what came from the deep. What came before the light." Silas's presence solidified rapidly, no longer just an outline, but a translucent, shimmering form standing between her and the enormous lens. He was a powerfully built man, his spectral form radiating an intense, controlled sadness. His blue uniform coat faded but immaculate. "You came to clear a haunting, Elara Vance. I am no haunting. I am the guardian, the one who holds the darkness in the stone." As he spoke, the temperature in the room didn't just drop, it plummeted. Not from Silas's energy, but from something else. From the cellar door she couldn't open. From the base of the tower, a profound alien coldness began to rise. Elara's EMF meters went dead, not from sabotage, but from an energy field so powerful it overloaded her sensors. The air began to vibrate with a subaudible, deeply unsettling sound, a sensation of wrongness that made the hairs on her arms stand on end and tasted metallic on her tongue. It was not the despair of a lost soul, but the ancient, primal hunger of something that was never meant to see the light of day. Silas looked at her, his eyes full of anguish. "You must go, or you must help me." The ancient darkness had just provided the proof that validated his plea. Her contract was instantly redefined. The primal, chilling shift in the lighthouse confirmed Silas's story and shattered Elara's professional objective. Crossing him over was no longer the priority. Containing the true darkness, the cage beneath the lighthouse, became the immediate, terrifying imperative. Elara, the pragmatist, immediately recognized the logic of the situation. Silas, the century-old guardian, was the most effective shield against a threat she couldn't even accurately measure. Her banishment protocols were shelved, and a reluctant, desperate alliance was formed in the cold, dusty lantern room. Their forced proximity was intense. They were confined to a crumbling stone tower, the living and the dead, their lives and non-life, now intertwined by a monstrous secret. Elara used her expertise to try and understand the true threat, setting up specialized magnetic and seismic sensors focused downward, while Silas acted as the intelligence, the centuries-old consciousness that mapped the movement of the darkness. He couldn't interact with her equipment, but he could communicate the shifts in energy. "It stirs when the tide is lowest," he communicated, the words a low, insistent feeling in her mind. "It pushes against the stone. It seeks the light." The constant communication, necessitated by the shared goal, quickly blurred the professional lines. Elara began to see Silas not as an assignment, but as a man tragically frozen in the moment of his greatest duty. He spoke of his life with a deep, quiet reverence, the feel of the tiller beneath his hands, the smell of canvas and salt, the sound of his wife's laughter. Elara, who was habitually guarded about her own life, found herself opening up, drawn out by the honesty of a man who literally had nothing left to lose. She spoke of her childhood, the unexplained gifts that had led her to this strange profession, and the painful isolation that came with seeing what others couldn't. One afternoon, as Elara was recalibrating a sensitive geophone, a sudden powerful tremor shook the tower, a short, deep rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. The darkness had pushed harder than before. Startled, Elara stumbled, nearly falling against the railing. Silas was instantly there, moving with the rapid, protective instinct of a living man. His spectral form intercepted her fall. Though he was intangible, Elara felt the impact, not cold, as she usually associated with a powerful ghost, but an impossible, focused warmth, like a lingering ember deep beneath icy water, radiating from the space where his chest should have been. The touch lasted only a second, yet it felt more substantial than any human touch she'd experienced in years. They drew apart instantly, both momentarily stunned. Silas's translucent face was etched with a profound distress that went beyond the threat of the cage. "I am sorry," he communicated, the thought laced with an unnerving tenderness. "I must not touch you. You are life. I am merely the echo of duty." Elara's hand instinctively went to the spot where he had caught her. The pragmatic ghost hunter, who had never believed in the possibility of an emotional tether to a spirit, felt a fierce, aching vulnerability bloom in her chest. She had come here to save a soul, but she was finding herself bound to him by the simple, inescapable truth of his presence and his sacrifice. The ethical quandary, the impossible nature of a living woman and a dead man, had just become painfully real. She was no longer just his ally. She was falling for the haunted guardian. Their alliance solidified into a grim, shared routine. Elara spent her days trying to quantify the cage, meticulously mapping the seismic anomalies and infrasound patterns emanating from the lighthouse foundation. Silas, his spectral form often hovering near her, was her tireless, unseen informant. He didn't just sense the darkness. He knew its history, its cyclical weakness, and its geological prisons. He described the subterranean fault line beneath the lighthouse not as stone, but as a scar on the world's silence, and the cage itself as a primal despair, hungry for the warmth of mortal consciousness. "The lighthouse," he explained, was built precisely on this scar. Its massive stone weight and the iron in its foundations designed not just to guide ships, but to seal that which lay beneath. As Elara worked, the forced proximity intensified the impossible nature of their bond. She was a woman of the material world. She needed sleep, coffee, and the bite of the coastal air. Silas needed none of these things, yet he mirrored her needs with a devotion that was profoundly human. He would ensure the wind didn't slam the loose door, or that a stray drop of rain didn't ruin her sensitive logbook. His spectral warmth, which she now knew he could exert, remained carefully controlled, but she felt the constant, focused intensity of his presence. It was a silent conversation that transcended words and logic. One evening, Elara was tracing an unusual energy spike on her thermal camera, which showed a column of unnatural cold radiating from the cellar door. "I need to know the exact dimensions of that chamber, Silas," she murmured, frustration evident in her tone. "I can't get past that damned iron lock." "What were the original blueprints?" Silas materialized beside her, his translucent hand gesturing toward a dust-caked map rolled up on a high shelf. "The plans are useless. The original builder, Captain Blackwood, changed everything. The lock is a ritual seal now, not a mechanism." Then, in a chillingly intimate gesture, his misty form knelt beside her, his breath, or the spectral equivalent, stirring the hair near her ear. "The cellar is not the key, Elara. The grief is the key. Every soul lost near this light feeds the cage, making the stone weaker." He projected the memory into her mind. A fleeting, vivid image of a raging 19th century storm, the roar of the sea, the frantic turning of the winch, and the sudden, horrific snap of a hull. It was the night he died. He wasn't tethered by guilt, but by the fierce, protective determination born from that final, agonizing failure. He hadn't been able to save the men he was sworn to protect, and now he swore to protect the light that held the darkness responsible. Elara recoiled slightly, not from the horror of the vision, but from the searing pain and duty she felt radiating from his memory. He wasn't just a ghost. He was a living wound of perpetual sacrifice. She looked at his face, framed by the cold light of the thermal camera, and saw not the century of the dead, but the agony of the moment he became stuck. Their professional alliance had transformed into a profound, intimate geography of shared grief and purpose. The relationship that was blooming in the desolate lighthouse was impossibly delicate, a whisper in a hurricane. Elara, the pragmatic ghost hunter who prided herself on controlling her emotions, found her control dissolving around Silas. She was drawn to his unwavering honor, the fierce dignity of his post, and the unexpected, heartbreaking tenderness of his affection. For Silas, Elara represented a tangible anchor to the world he was forced to observe, the warmth of her living presence, the sound of her breath, the sharp intellect in her eyes. It was a profound, agonizing form of desire, the living soul yearning for the spectral touch, and the spirit aching for the permanence of life. One morning, the tension peaked. Elara awoke from a fitful sleep on her cot, finding that Silas had tidied her cramped quarters. Her boots were lined up, her notes organized, and a single, perfectly smooth piece of sea-tumbled glass lay on her pillow, a gift from the man who couldn't buy her flowers. She sat up, the gesture piercing her emotional defenses. "Silas," she called, her voice thick. He appeared instantly, standing near the light source, casting a faint, silvery shadow. This is too much. You are not a domestic helper. You are a sea captain, a guardian. I am nothing, Elara. I am only what I am here. And here I watch you sleep. I watch you worry. I feel the cold on your skin," he projected, his image wavering with rare emotion. "It is agony to watch a life when you cannot affect its warmth. The glass is merely a kindness. It's not kindness, Silas, it's torture," Elara countered, standing up. "You are making me feel tethered to you, and that can't happen. You are dead. I am alive. What can we possibly build? A temporary truce until you are free? Until I banish you?" The word banish tasted like ash on her tongue. Silas didn't recoil from the word. He stepped forward, his spectral presence filling the small space between them. "You speak of logic, Elara, but logic has no dominion here." He reached out slowly, deliberately, his shimmering hand passing through the space where her own heart beat. This time he didn't stop. He pressed his spectral form against hers, enveloping her in a focused field of that strange, warm energy. Elara didn't feel cold. She felt an overwhelming sense of presence, of a heavy, centuries-old consciousness embracing her. It was a kiss without lips, a touch without skin. It was devastating. In that moment of impossible union, Silas allowed her to perceive the weight of his eternity, the crushing loneliness of watching the decades turn, the pain of hearing the foghorns change their rhythm, the unbearable silence of having no one to share his vigil with. Elara gasped, tears starting in her eyes, not from fear, but from the profound empathy that tore through her soul. When he withdrew, the warmth lingered, an imprint of his soul on her skin. She realized that the ethical quandary was not about whether they could build a life together, but whether she could endure the pain of knowing their life, their contact and their very existence together was a continuous, beautiful violation of reality. Their love was anchored in the impossibility of its fulfillment. The intimate connection spurred Elara into action, fueling a desperate need to find a solution to the cage, a solution that protected both the living world and Silas. She couldn't banish him. He was now the center of her world. She realized the key lay not in banishing Silas, but in strengthening the seal he was guarding. She abandoned her crossing over equipment entirely, focusing solely on mapping the weakness Silas called the grief breach. Through complex seismic monitoring, she discovered that the ancient darkness beneath the lighthouse wasn't trapped by the stone's physical weight alone. It was trapped by the stone's inherent magnetic and mineral composition, which naturally repelled the specific, chaotic energy of the entity. But the seismic tremors, the result of the cage pushing against the seal, were causing tiny microfractures in the rock, creating conductive pathways for the darkness to bleed into the world. Silas was holding the energy back with sheer psychic willpower, but the burden was slowly destroying his ability to maintain cohesion. He was fading, his spectral form becoming more translucent with every passing day. Elara theorized that she could use modern materials to reinforce the lighthouse's foundations and, more critically, introduce a high concentration of specific, stabilizing minerals to the rock. The problem was the entry point. The only access was the cellar, sealed by the magical, ritualistic iron lock that Silas couldn't open and she couldn't pick. "It responds to the language of duty," Silas told her, his voice faint one morning. The original key was forged with an oath. Together, they pieced together the history. The lock wasn't keyed to a piece of metal, but to a vibrational frequency. The exact sound of the original Captain Blackwood reciting his vow to keep the light burning and the darkness sealed. This was a supernatural password, a sonic key. Elara, using her audio analysis equipment, began the painstaking process of reconstructing the precise pitch and rhythm of a century-old spoken oath based on historical texts and the subtle residual energy in the stone. The work was slow and agonizingly precise, and they faced constant, subtle sabotage from the cage. Objects would rattle violently near Elara's equipment. Cold spots would move with purpose to short-circuit her sensitive microphones. One evening, a concentrated spike of primal dread flared up, so powerful it sent a shockwave through the room, knocking Elara to the floor. As she scrambled back up, she saw Silas, his form barely visible, standing directly over the cellar door, his arms outstretched, absorbing the brunt of the assault. "It knows what you seek, Elara. It is afraid of your solutions." He was using the last of his energy to act as a buffer. The sight solidified her resolve. She wasn't just working to save the world. She was working to save her guardian. Under the intense pressure of the darkness, which now pulsed visibly as a faint, oppressive darkness beneath the stone floor, Elara finally succeeded. She generated a synthesized audio file, a blend of archival recordings and spectral frequency analysis, designed to perfectly match the original captain's oath. The frequency was high, powerful, and laden with the sonic echo of solemn duty. They stood before the massive iron door. Elara held the speaker, her hand trembling. Silas stood close to her, his presence now so faint that she had to strain her senses to feel his warm anchor. "If this works, Silas," Elara whispered, looking at the shimmering outline of his face, "we buy you time. Time to figure out how to maintain your self-cohesion, how to rest, how to be something more than just a wall. My life is already spent, Elara. To buy you time is enough." His words were full of acceptance, a peace that both broke and healed her heart. Elara hit play. The sound system, amplified to the max, blasted the synthesized voice. "I swear by the stone, the sea, and the perpetual light to hold the darkness beneath the world until the age is spent." The resonance was immediate. The iron door didn't unlock. It dissolved the ritual seal. With a groan of ancient metal and grinding stone, the door sprang open, revealing a staircase descending into an oily black abyss. A gust of foul, icy air rushed out, carrying the metallic tang of decay and a brief, overwhelming sense of crushing hopelessness that nearly dropped Elara to her knees. This was the true face of the cage. Just as the path was cleared, a massive final surge of energy erupted from the depths. It was a focused counterattack from the terrified darkness, a wave of chaotic, destabilizing energy aimed at the lighthouse's weakest point, the Guardian. Silas cried out, a soundless shriek that vibrated painfully in Elara's skull as the energy passed through him. His spectral form violently fractured, shimmering like heat haze over pavement, unable to maintain his singular cohesion under the attack. He had spent his last ounce of willpower on holding the seal long enough for the oath to be spoken. "Silas!" Elara screamed, reaching out to the fracturing light that was his soul. He was dissolving, fading not to rest, but into fragmented energy. Before he vanished completely, he projected one final, desperate thought to her mind, his eternal voice laced with panic and absolute love. "The key is beneath the light. You must seal it. Save the light, Elara, save me." Then the residual warmth vanished, leaving only the crushing, sterile cold of the lighthouse and the gaping, hungry maw of the cellar. Elara was left alone, kneeling on the cold stone, faced with the agonizing truth. She had succeeded in opening the path to saving the world, but in doing so, she had lost the only man she had ever truly loved. She had to choose now, mourn her loss, or follow his last command and save the fractured light of his soul. Silas's fragmented plea, "The key is beneath the light. You must seal it. Save the light, Elara. Save me," echoed in Elara's mind, a desperate beacon in the suffocating despair that radiated from the open cellar. There was no time for grief. He was not gone. He was scattered, his essence clinging to the last vestiges of his duty. Elara knew what she had to do. She strapped on her most powerful headlamp, secured her utility belt with its array of sensors and mineral samples, and with a deep, shaky breath, descended into the abyss. The cellar was not a simple stone room. It was a chaotic, subterranean cathedral of raw, unworked rock, ancient beyond human reckoning. The air was thick and heavy, tasting of ozone and something akin to burned iron, and the cold was absolute, piercing through her thick layers of clothing. Her headlamp struggled against the pervasive darkness, revealing only jagged walls that seemed to writhe, and a floor of uneven, damp earth. Her EMF meter, once dead, now screamed, displaying incomprehensible, chaotic fluctuations of energy. This was the heart of the cage, a pocket dimension of pure, primal wrongness. As she moved deeper, the whispers began. Not voices, but a psychic assault of fear and despair, seeking to unravel her sanity. Images flashed in her mind. Ships breaking apart on unseen reefs, loved ones lost to the unforgiving sea, the crushing weight of loneliness. This was the grief breach Silas had spoken of, a malevolent consciousness that fed on sorrow. Elara fought it, clinging to the image of Silas's determined face, the phantom warmth of his touch. He was her anchor against the tide of cosmic dread. She was guided by his fragmented mental projections, faint, shimmering trails of his essence like phosphorescent plankton in a lightless sea, leading her deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels that snaked beneath the lighthouse. The deeper she went, the more concentrated the raw essence of the cage became. It manifested as shimmering, oily blackness that pulsed with a low, sub-audible throb, occasionally sending tendrils of icy mist swirling around her. Her mission was twofold: locate the true source of the breach, and if possible, find a way to stabilize Silas's fractured spirit. She knew from her geological scans that the true weakness was a deep, horizontal fissure in the bedrock, a natural conduit for the darkness. She carried with her a specialized resin infused with a high concentration of specific, earth-stabilizing minerals, iron, quartz, and an ancient, magnetic ore which she believed could act as a permanent physical and energetic seal. But she also carried a small, intricate device of her own design, a spirit lure, tuned to resonate with the unique frequency of a soul's attachment to duty and protection. It was her desperate hope for Silas. Elara found the fissure deep within the rock, a jagged, weeping wound that bled cold, primordial darkness. The air here was so thick with negative energy that her skin crawled, and her mind threatened to buckle under the weight of accumulated despair. This was the source, the direct conduit to whatever ancient malevolence lay trapped within the earth. As she prepared the resin, the whispers intensified, trying to break her focus, feeding on her own fear and the acute, aching pain of Silas's apparent loss. Just as she was about to apply the sealant, a shimmering, fractured image materialized before her. A ghostly, translucent outline of Silas, stretched thin, barely coherent. He was not a whole being, but a collection of shimmering fragments, pulled apart by the cage's earlier assault, held together only by the sheer force of his enduring will. He was struggling, fighting to maintain some semblance of his form, but his essence was dissolving, pulled toward the consuming darkness. Elara, the light. It feeds on the unheld, he projected, his words barely coherent. Your light, your hope. Seeing him like this, so broken and yet still fighting, galvanized Elara. No, Silas, she cried, her voice echoing fiercely in the cavern. You are not unheld. You are here with me. She quickly set down the sealant and activated her spirit lure. The device emitted a gentle, rhythmic hum, a low, inviting frequency designed to resonate with the core signature of Silas's protective spirit. It was a difficult process, like trying to gather mist with a whisper, but she focused, pouring all her will and her profound love for him into the signal. She visualized his complete form, his steady gaze, the strength of his duty. Slowly, painstakingly, the fractured fragments of Silas's form began to coalesce. Shards of light, remnants of his consciousness, were drawn back to the central hum of the lure, rebuilding his spectral image piece by piece. He shimmered, struggled, and then, with an almost audible sigh that vibrated the very air, his full, albeit still translucent, form solidified before her. He was whole again, but profoundly weak, his energy flickering. Elara. You gathered the pieces, he communicated, his voice now clearer, laced with a wonder that transcended his ghostly nature. He looked at her, his spectral eyes filled with an unspeakable tenderness and gratitude. You are my anchor, my key. The reunion was brief, for the darkness surged again, enraged by the reclaiming of its prey. The fissure pulsed violently. I need to seal this, Silas. Elara yelled over the cacophony of psychic dread. I need you to hold it back just for a moment. Summoning a final desperate surge of his ancient willpower, Silas positioned himself directly in front of the bleeding fissure, his body acting as a living spiritual shield. His spectral hands pushed against the invisible barrier, his features contorted in silent strain as the blackness tried to consume him. Elara worked with frantic speed, applying the mineral-infused resin into the fissure, praying it would be enough. The moment Elara applied the last of the mineral resin, the cavern erupted in a cacophony of psychic screams. The darkness recoiled, thrashing against the new material barrier, enraged. The very rock groaned, and a deep, guttural roar echoed from the abyss, a sound of ancient fury. But the sealant held. The minerals, imbued with their specific repellent frequencies, began to solidify, weaving a new, impenetrable forever seal over the wound in the earth. The pervasive cold receded, the psychic whispers died down to a faint, defeated sigh, and the chaotic EMF readings slowly, steadily returned to normal background radiation. The cage was contained, perhaps not forever, but for another age. Silas, drained and shimmering, collapsed against the newly sealed rock, his form barely visible. The effort had taken an immense toll. He was whole but dangerously weak, his light flickering like a candle in a strong breeze. Elara rushed to him, her heart aching. Silas, are you all right? She whispered, her hand passing through his translucent shoulder. I am held, he communicated, his voice faint but filled with an incredible sense of peace, no longer scattered. You brought me back, Elara. You gave me back my essence. He looked at the sealed fissure, then back at her, a profound understanding in his spectral eyes. The darkness is a natural force. It feeds on sorrow, yes, but it is also contained by joy, by life. You are the light, Elara. You are the counterfrequency to its despair. The ascent from the cellar was slow, methodical. As they emerged into the main tower, the light of the rising sun streamed through the grime-caked lantern room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The lighthouse no longer felt oppressive. It felt like a sanctuary, a place of quiet strength. Silas, though still weak, radiated a new profound peace. He was no longer just a guardian tethered by duty. He was a spirit anchored by love. The ethical dilemma, however, remained. He was a ghost. She was a living woman. How could they build a life together? As Elara sat on the floor, exhausted but triumphant, Silas slowly, carefully materialized beside her. I am tethered now, Elara. Not by the cage, but by you. My duty is done, but my presence, it is not. You are the key, the light that makes me whole. He reached out, his spectral hand passing through her, but this time the warmth was not fleeting. It was constant, a steady, comforting presence that flowed through her veins. He had learned to manipulate his energy, to exist in a new, more tangible state. He was still a ghost, but he was a ghost who could touch her, who could radiate warmth, who could share her space without being merely an echo. Life at Blackwater Lighthouse took on a new, extraordinary rhythm. Elara finished her assignment not by crossing Silas over, but by securing him and by securing the lighthouse itself. Her report to her agency was vague but convincing. Target neutralized. Property secured. Unique stabilization methods employed. She received her payment, but she knew she couldn't leave. Her life was here now, in the crumbling lighthouse, with the man who was literally stuck between worlds, but who had found his anchor in her. She renovated the lighthouse with a fierce devotion, not merely restoring it, but transforming it into a home. She replaced broken panes, painted the peeling walls, and filled the cold stone spaces with warmth and light, physical and emotional. Silas was her silent, tireless partner. He couldn't lift a hammer, but he could move tools, ensure her safety, and offer a steady, comforting presence. He would tell her stories of the sea, memories from a century past, and she would tell him of the world that had moved on, the marvels of technology, the changing tides of human progress. Their romance was unconventional, a testament to the fact that love could indeed transcend the boundaries of life and death. Their connection deepened into a profound, unspeakable intimacy. He could not eat with her, but he could feel the warmth of her hand as she held his spectral one. He could not sleep beside her, but he would hover nearby, radiating a soothing presence that chased away her nightmares. Their shared goal had gone from containing a darkness to building a life where a living woman and a dead man forged a unique, unbreakable bond. One evening, as the sun set over the wild, churning sea, Elara stood in the newly restored lantern room, the powerful beam of the lighthouse once again cutting a swath through the gathering twilight. Silas stood beside her, his form more solid now, his light steady and unwavering, his arm a comforting warmth around her. You are more than a guardian now, Silas, Elara said, looking at him, her eyes filled with a love that defied all logic. You are my life, my light. He looked at her, his spectral eyes reflecting the powerful beam of the lighthouse. And you, Elara Vance, he communicated, his voice clear and strong in her mind. You are my perpetual dawn, the one who brought light to my eternity, the one who made me whole. The lighthouse beam spun, casting its golden glow across the vast, dark ocean, a symbol not just of guidance, but of an impossible, enduring love that had found its forever home in the heart of a haunted guardian and a pragmatic ghost hunter. Their life together was a new kind of light, a beacon in the storm, proving that even across the greatest divide, true love could find its own, eternal harmony.